Welcome back to One Winning Pod, where many of us don't know our own memes. That's okay. We're back to talk about Jacksonville Jaguars and the matchup the Ravens will have after Turkey Day down in Florida after what was a very frigid game at M&T Bank. They'll be going down to Florida for what will hopefully be better conditions. Hopefully Lamar will enjoy being back in his home state and the warm embrace of that air. But yeah, I feel like we got to start off the show talking about this meme thing and the fact that we got even more memes in today's show.
Yeah, well, okay, but before we get to that, speaking of the last weekend being a really cold game, did you guys see the news? Like, that was like the coldest day in November on record.
Of course it was.
From Maryland, right? Not ever.
Yeah. No, from as measured in like Baltimore, I guess it was on like WBAL, I think. But yeah, not the coldest. Yeah, not the coldest day ever. Yeah. in the entire universe. But back to the memes. You know, man. Yeah, Pablo Escobar. It's a Pablo Escobar, waiting meme. It's a thing, guys. I didn't realize that it was going to be such a thing, but I shared it with our group chat and our little game day chat on Discord, and you know what? KJ, listener KJ, he agreed with me. He was like, "How the heck do you guys not know the Pablo Escobar meme?" And then he also recommended that we watch Narcos.
Right, which is then where we get to the part of the story where 2 minutes before we start recording here, Chris admits that although he's a big fan of the meme, he has not seen the show, which he failed to mention, last episode. So,
yeah, but I did my research. Sometimes if I find a meme I like and gives me some chuckles, I go on to know your meme. I'm like, I'm gonna go on a little history lesson today, figure out where this thing came from.
Man,
that's how I spend my free time.
Called out, respecting the original artist who actually put together those still images rather than the random Joe on the internet who decided to put funny captions over front of it. Good guy Chris right there.
Good guy Chris. Well, I just looked it up, guys. It's going to be 71 degrees and sunny on kickoff down in Jacksonville, according to the current forecast. So pretty much a 180. Looks like no wind. Just a very nice day. Right now, the Ravens are favored by 4 points, and the over-under is 43.5 points, which is kind of interesting. You're looking at this team. They're 3-7, third place in the AFC South. I thought this was a pretty interesting stat. 11-point differential, plus 11, but it's mostly because they've had 2 big wins where they really ran up the score, and then whenever they lose, they're losing by 1 score most of the time. So very odd team, I feel like. It looks like there's a lot of signs, from what I can tell, there's a lot of signs of a growing team, an improving team, but they're just not quite there yet, and they're not being able to put together many wins.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate, and it really came clear to me researching this team and a little more than I knew just how many really young players they have they're relying on who are either rookies or in years 2 and 3. I mean, obviously, Trayvon Walker and Trevor Lawrence are the big names, and I guess Travis Etienne now as well. But we'll get into, there's some other guys too, really young guys on the defensive side. Offense is a little older, but yeah, just a collection of players, all of which have potential, but they're all at different stages of figuring it out. And when you have that for a team, it generally doesn't translate into a lot of consistency. Maybe a couple of seasons down the road it will, but yeah, this team's definitely still in a growing mold. I think they're better than they were last year, which isn't saying much because it was really hard to be worse than they were, but a team with a lot of potential, and it will be interesting playing this team off a bye. They'll be on the bye. The coaching staff will probably coach these guys up. Their young minds are probably going to take to it, and we'll see if they come out of the gate and surprise the Ravens a little bit in the onset with some renewed vigor. But yeah, I mean, it's a game I think the Ravens should win again, just like last week, but certainly a team that has players that can give the Ravens some trouble if they're not 100% on their A game.
Yeah, I think we should probably start talking about the offense because I think, at least for me, I think there's probably a lot of variance that we could kind of see out of quarterback Trevor Lawrence. certainly a guy. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but while I was also looking at internet memes, one thing that was pretty common during the time was that the hype for Trevor Lawrence was a huge thing a couple of years ago. Everybody was like, "Oh man, he's the best quarterback to come out of college since Peyton Manning." Very highly touted. He's going to be a quarterback that was pro ready. All this stuff. Certainly the first year, a little bit rough. Definitely not lighting the NFL by storm. But then again, I think a lot of people, rightfully so, pointed out, hey, Peyton didn't either. He had a lot of turnovers in his rookie year. Year two, I still, at least to me, like it doesn't really seem like he's kind of hit that trajectory. I think a lot of it right now kind of seems like the hype was a little bit overblown. Certainly, like, completion percentage up from last year, touchdown interception ratio better from last year. But still, man, the thing that kind of stands out to me that I'm not sure if he has the poise to just like make the key throws in key situations. I mean, the one thing that really kind of stands out to me, that the Denver game in London, man, of just, a very winnable game, in my opinion. Lawrence just being able to get down the field, be able to get a late score, and first play just throws an interception, like a really bad one. Just like, there are a lot of plays like that, man. Just a little head scratching, and like you said, Peter, kind of a sign of a team that still has to grow. They need a lot more coaching and just seasoning in the game and everything. But it's one of those things. He's got the talent, though. He's got the arm, and he can do some things. But it's really, for me, I think it's the mental game, and that is one of the a little bit scary, because they could turn it on at any time.
Yeah, I'm looking at this draft right now. Oh, there's a name we all know. Calais Campbell, 50th overall pick in the second round. But, Matt Ryan was drafted 3rd overall in his draft year. Same draft year as Joe Flacco, of course, as every Ravens fan's probably keenly aware of. But he kind of reminds me a little bit of Matt Ryan and kind of what I'm starting to think his career trajectory might be. I think he could be an above average NFL quarterback, but I don't think he's going to be in the pantheon of the elites. And it's just a difficult, I think, pill to swallow for Jacksonville when you got a guy who's so well heralded, like you mentioned, coming out of college, best pocket passer, most cerebral passer since Peyton Manning, since Andrew Luck, etc. And to get a guy who's not quite level setting, level jump quarterback, but I think he can still be very highly functional and take a team deep into the playoffs, even win a Super Bowl with that level of talent. I don't know if he's ever gonna lift people around. But I will say, as mentioned, coming out of the shroud of Urban, he's been able to increase his completion percentage and dramatically improve his touchdown to interception ratio this year. And one of the coolest stats that we have here is that basically the man becomes very poor in clutch situations, fourth quarters where it's a score ball game in the last 2 minutes of either half. He completely implodes, and he throws a lot of interceptions in these time frames. If he can clean that up, this could be the next step in his evolution to really becoming one of these top tier passers. Maybe not like A tier, but solid B tier. Or maybe A tier, but not the S tier, depending on how your tier system works. So I think that's really the next step for him. And, for a second year quarterback, that's not terrible. I think we really do put a lot of stress on these guys to perform right away. And I think it is positive to see the sign that they added some pass catchers around him, added weapons, and he's improving. He's not flatlining. Zach Wilson, they added everything around him, and they're like, we'll give you 3 inches, less than 3 inches in the second half, per play, and and everything's fine, right? At least he's not doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the jury's still out on what this guy's ceiling can be, and at the same time, floor. I think that you look at him and he'll make plays that make you think he could be among the elite quarterbacks in the league, and then we're bringing up his stats at the end of games in tight situations. He looks atrocious on that. Week 1, Chris brought up the game in Denver. That one was not good. I think even worse than that was that game in week 1 against the Commanders, where he got forced out to his left, and just instead of just throwing the ball away, just decided for whatever reason to heave it deep, underthrew Christian Kirk by it was like a 10-yard underthrow by the time Christian Kirk had run back into the frame. It was awful and just the easiest pick ever for Washington. In fairness to him, he had what should have been the game-winning drive against Indianapolis in that second game. Just the defense gave up that touchdown at the end there, and there was no time left in that game, 17 seconds. So, they tried the old pitch play, and of course that didn't work. So, but yeah, I agree. You look at this guy, and he has the tools. He has improved, and it's just really interesting. This draft class, it came out with all these quarterbacks who are really highly heralded, and we're seeing this year. Unfortunately, Trey Lance is incredibly incomplete because of his inability to stay healthy. But Mac Jones and Zach Wilson just having awful sophomore seasons. Trevor Lawrence having a solid one. Justin Fields is having a pretty bad one too. Except for the past 4 weeks, the Bears have just allowed him to run loose, and he's actually looking pretty good right now. But when we compare his passing numbers to Lawrence, Lawrence actually has slightly better passing numbers. So, yeah, I think what all this means for this matchup coming up after this bye, like we're saying, I think we hit it right on the head. We just don't know what to expect in this matchup from Trevor Lawrence. We don't know if this is going to be a game that the Ravens defense is going to be able to easily dominate him, or they're going to be able to get in the backfield and force him to rush throws, force him to throw high and get an interception off that. That is another one of his tendencies, is to throw the ball a couple feet high on receivers. Or is it, is he going to come out of the bye week refocused? Are they going to have a sharper game plan? Look at what he did well, what worked well for him in the first half, what didn't. And, the coaching staff be able to craft a plan around him that can keep the Jaguars in the game. It's hard to say. So we'll just have to see on Sunday. But what I will say, I think looking at the film of what I was able to today, whether or not Trevor Lawrence is on his game on Sunday, I think the Ravens will have a very favorable matchup against this offensive line. This offensive line really does not look particularly special. Really struggled against the Kansas City Chiefs and in other games this year, particularly the right side. The right tackle gave up at least 3 sacks in that game. We're talking about the Ravens pass rush that continues week in and week out. I think they're going to have another really good matchup here, and that should really help set the tone for this game from the defensive standpoint again, if the offense is having some issues getting out of the gate, scoring points.
It's a game I'd like to think, similar to last week, while this offense might have slightly higher, they definitely, not even slightly, they have definitely a higher ceiling than the Panthers offense did with these weapons that they have, that I think our defense should be able to really limit their production and have another dominant performance. But here's the kicker. This is the number one thing that's going to make me scared about this team, and I think it'll be reiterated through many phases of the game. Coming off this bye, and also against the quality of opponent that the Ravens are, I think they're going to come out relatively fearless, because there's nothing bad that can come of this game. Like, if they get absolutely trounced, if the Ravens look hot on offense, hot on defense, and they get blown out of the water, it'll be like, well, the Ravens are really good. They happen to have a really good game against us. Whatever. But if they come out fearless and they start getting some completions and some swagger, it could be a little bit more intimidating for the Ravens, because I just really feel like this team has nothing to lose. They might come out loose, well coached from a bye, and that's the number one thing that scares me about this, is that this team doesn't. I don't think they're going to play scared, because there's no expectation for them to win.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And we're looking at this team, and if you look at the beginning of the season, before fatigue started to set in, some injuries and stuff, this team came out of the gate hot, and we were looking at the Jaguars as possibly a surprise team this year. They came out and in week 2, after that loss to Washington, where they played well, but not well enough to win that game against a opponent they should have been able to beat. Blanked the Colts at home, 24-0, and then the next week traveled to L.A., and they had that huge win against the Chargers. We referenced those at the beginning. And then after that, things kind of got off the rails a bit. But Yeah, I could certainly see this team again. Like we're saying, young players. They're all trying to make a mark in this league. They're not necessarily caring about winning or losing yet right now. They're trying to get that next big contract. They're going to come and play. They're going to come and give the Ravens their best effort. So trap game is certainly a possibility for this one. And once again, we're traveling back to Florida for the Ravens post-September. I know that they had great luck against the Bucs in that game. They were able to kind of use the humidity against them. But still, this is still an area where the Ravens have struggled, even not just against Miami or Tampa, against Jacksonville as well. We saw in the Joe Flacco era, 2016, I believe, was a pretty sloppy game that the Ravens won on a late field goal against a Jaguars team they should have been able to put down pretty easily. Another year in Jacksonville, if you look at the game in 2011, that Monday night game where we all were expecting the Ravens to roll over the Jaguars by a multiple touchdown lead. They end up losing that game 12-7. So, it's a game they're going to have to take seriously. But I think in one sense, the difficulties they had last week might actually benefit them. And, they can look at that and say, like, hey, our offense is down some guys. It's not as easy for us to move the ball and score points as it is when we have Andrews out there at full strength, when we got Gus and JK, when we got Bateman. Let's have a better contingency plan out there and really focus on the red zone and offense. So the struggles from last week could lead to an increased focus, which could help combat the youthful energy that the Jaguars could possibly bring out of this bye.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point, Peter. I think, kind of on that note, we should probably move on to the defense at some point. But before we do that, one thing I did want to mention, we kind of just go through some of the offensive weapons to kind of close out at least the offensive side of the ball a little bit. Because certainly, at least on paper, I would think that the Jags kind of probably have some better weapons on offense than what the Panthers had, at least, even including the quarterback for that matter. It's not like Mayfield was playing that well. But Travis Etienne, you mentioned earlier, has been having a great last couple of weeks. He's definitely a back that I think can give the Ravens a little bit of trouble. Currently 10th in the league in rushing. Been doing very well since James Robinson has been traded to the New York Jets. And honestly, after that trade, I feel like the Jags almost won that one because Robinson is not being used all that much at all. But yeah, other than that, I mean, you've got Christian Kirk as well, having a great season. He's another guy who, actually it was kind of the reverse of Trevor Lawrence. It was, why did the Jags spend so much money on Christian Kirk? He's barely a third receiver for the Cardinals, and then all of a sudden he's actually a very good wide receiver one for them. Been doing very well down there. You also have got other guys, Zay Jones, Marvin Jones, Evan Engram. A couple of those guys as well, kind of on the offense. Overall, not a group that is super scary, but also they're fairly productive. So, if they get the right things clicking on offense, I think they definitely have some players to do damage. As you said, if this turns into a game like what happened last week against the Panthers, I think the Jags have enough guys to be able to make the plays that they need to, as long as they're poised to do it.
Yeah, and I think the big thing we'll see with these collection of players is it's a common thing to say, but I think it's particularly true with them. We just got to make sure we tackle them. And we'll talk about it on the other side of the ball. They really struggle with tackling, but we have to make sure because what they really seem to emphasize is screens, quick passes, the bootlegs, play action. If these are the main points of emphasis, then they're looking for that yak to really get benefit out of those plays. And I'm looking for our team to be able to, if they aren't able to break up the pass play, to just be right there to tackle right away and limit the damage. So, particularly with ETN too, I think if they try to utilize him a lot in the pass game, I know that he only had about 3 targets per game, which is a little lower than I would expect, given the fact that of his draft pedigree and his relationship with Lawrence. But still, if those 3 times he gets targeted, let's say he catches all 3, that's it wouldn't shock you at all to see that he had 30 yards catching. That's all first downs and stuff like that. So you got to just make sure to wrap him up and not get him going because he is a dynamic guy. When you see him on the field, He definitely he kind of reminds me of like a better Justice Hill as far as when he touches the ball, he really has a lot of electricity and pop. And yeah, you don't want to let him slide through one tackler because it could be very dangerous.
Yeah, ETN's really a special player. Really exciting for the Jaguars to finally get him on the field, and fantasy football players everywhere, because everyone was really excited about him coming out. And then there was the injury, but now he's here and he's given the goods, and hopefully the Ravens can bottle him up like Kansas City was relatively able to do last time the Jaguars were on the field. But moving on to the defensive side of the football, this is another area where, again, a lot of young players, some interesting names that have a lot of potential, but are, quite frankly, struggling right now to adapt to the NFL. We're going to talk about 2 high draft picks that the Jags have that are having some early career struggles that are kind of analogous to some players on the Ravens. But, just to give an overall of this defense, it's just been a wildly inconsistent season. We talked about what they were able to do against the Chargers and the Colts. In 3 games this season against the Colts, the Chargers, and the Texans, they only gave up an average of around 7.7 points per game in those contests. But then you look at the other 7 games, and it's 26 per game, just night and day difference. And the major thing that they've had is an issue that we harped on with the Ravens early in this season and a lot more last year. They're just missing a ton of tackles. This was a crazy stat I came across. Apparently, in the game they had against Houston, according to Pro Football Focus, so however they're tracking missed tackles in their data, they claim that in that game, the Jacksonville Jaguars defense missed more tackles in that game than in any other defense in any other single game since they've been recording that.
Agreed.
Which is not good, obviously. And I don't know if they've improved that terribly much. Those numbers aren't terribly easy to pinpoint down. But I will say, when looking at watching some of the film from that Kansas City game, it was still there. They were still missing some tackles. They're still allowing the Chiefs to get some bigger plays than they should have been able to in certain situations. So that's something that hopefully the Ravens can exploit, and it'll be nice to, after last year having to be on the wrong end of that too many times. But just a group yet again, like we said with the offense, but I think a little more so for this unit. A lot of young players with high potential who are still trying to figure out how to bring some aspects of their game to the NFL level.
I'm guessing your comp for Trayvon Walker would be Owe?
That it would be.
Yeah, so you got this guy, first overall pick this year. The definition of has all the traits, but not quite the production. And he started off similar to Owe. The hot start, showing those flashes of why they drafted him first overall, the length, the speed, the versatility. And now he's, still trying to develop an actual pass rush plan and consistency at the NFL level. And we all know that kind of player takes a lot of time. Could be until his 3rd season they really starts to tear off. But still a player that you have to respect. And I'm curious if we'll have Stanley. It seems like a quiet day on the Ravens news front. No updates on Stanley, no updates on Hamilton as far as the injuries go. But if he's unable to go, I do think McCary could have a lot of trouble with him just because of that length. And that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, for sure. On the other side as well, if we're going to continue kind of talking about the pass rush, Josh Allen, not the quarterback, but defensive end for the Jaguars, not to be confused with the quarterback, been playing pretty well. He's definitely been a weapon for them, probably one of the bright spots on the defensive line group at there. Arden Key as well has been a bright spot on this defensive line group. I believe he played for the 49ers last year. He was a guy that at least we were thinking about taking a look at in the offseason, but he ended up signing with the Jags. But yeah, they've, like the Panthers the previous week, I think they've got some guys, they got some guys to kind of take advantage of some of the injuries up on our front. I think it's definitely going to be a key for the Ravens to continue to improve on the run game side of things, get those guys off the ball, be able to create a little bit more space than they were able to last week. and especially in the red zone as well. Be able to shut down the pass rush, give Lamar a little bit of time for finding some receivers in the end zones.
Yeah, definitely. Again, we're talking about how the Ravens need to do a better job of establishing the run than they did last week. And yes, if you look at this team, they are a little weaker in pass defense. Against the rush, they are actually just into the top 10th in the league as far as average yards given up per game on the ground. And yeah, some of it is due to the linebacker play, which has been good, but wanting from what I've seen from Jaguars message boards and some Locked On Jaguars podcast. And, in particular, another area that they are having some concern is another high draft pick they had this year, Devin Lloyd. It's kind of analogous to Patrick Queen, just a guy who's very athletic and a violent tackler, but misses tackles and is starting to lose some playing time as a result of it. He's been splitting time with third-round pick Chad Muma over the past couple games, who's done decently well for them, has had his struggles as well as expected with a rookie. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking for where the Ravens might be able to have some success there, it'd be running in his lane. Force him to show that he used the bye week well and is coming out refocused, learning from what went wrong as the season went along. Because again, like Walker, another guy who started out really hot for them, but just started trailing off as the weeks went on. So yeah, I mean, I think that's another area the Ravens could have some success here. Is just attacking some of the inexperience at the linebacker positions against this kind of 5-2-4 front that the Jags run to get some ability to establish the run and hopefully make the passing game a little easier than it was last week.
I think this is a really interesting point. If you look at their personnel, young personnel, but the ceiling would be to be able to pull off a similar game plan as to what Carolina was able to do against us and really slow down our run game. So curious to see, A, if they can execute something like that, and B, how the Ravens are able to respond after a week where their running game wasn't quite working until the end. And I'm curious to see that chess match, because I'm a little afraid that maybe the book might be out on how to slow down the Ravens running game after that. The key, though, to that book is I think it takes the right player personnel and the right discipline, and not every team has that. So will the Jacksonville Jaguars be able to have that? Will they be able to adapt? I can see a world where they will be able to, but got to keep an eye on it. And I'm definitely excited to see Devin Lloyd and Chad Muma play, because those are two guys I remember talking about during the draft process. And it's always fun to kind of like check in on these guys and see how they're playing. So definitely, a lot to look forward to in the middle of the field.
Definitely, yeah, and I agree with that. It'll be really interesting to see that. And in addition to those guys, so when we're talking about the pass defense for the Jaguars, this isn't going to be another interesting thing to see how the Ravens handle, because we talked about in the last episode how the past two games, Devin Duvernay has basically disappeared from the offense. He's gotten a few touches, but nowhere near what we would like to see from the guy, especially considering the injuries that the Ravens have, with your pass catchers really being down to Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and Demarcus Robinson if Duvernay is taken out of the game plan. And while the Jaguars have a lot of players who are young and struggling, a guy who is already playing at an all-pro level is a second-year cornerback, Tyson Campbell. This guy's been an absolute stud for the Jaguars this year. He's allowing a 71.5 quarterback rating thrown against him this year. For comparison, Marlon has a 63.6. Both those numbers are from Pro Football Reference, which isn't a stat I love, because I never know exactly how that number is calculated, and it feels like something that could be a little subjective depending on what certain coverages could be. But anyways, still, you watch the tape and it's quite clear this guy is going to be a star at the NFL level. he was a big reason that the Jaguars were able to come back against the Raiders a few weeks ago, despite the fact that Devontae Adams had a monster first half in that game. The Jaguars just basically had him just match Campbell up one-on-one with Adams the rest of the game, and he shut him out for the rest of the game. Made several very great athletic plays to break up passes, and just really made Adams work. And watching the game film against the Chiefs last week or 2 weeks ago, I was watching that game. From what I watched at least, I didn't see Mahomes challenge Campbell once. That's where this guy is right now. So that is going to be interesting. Are the Jaguars going to use him to basically take Duvernay or Robinson out of the game, or are they just going to, focus on Mark Andrews instead? But I think regardless of what they do, Campbell is going to be the number one guy on this defense that the Ravens are going to have to figure out how to maneuver around, because he is that good at this point.
Yeah, I think another guy as well who's playing pretty good in the secondary, Andre Sisco, their free safety. Another guy definitely to watch out for. It's one of those matchups, man. Like, I think between Campbell and Sisco and maybe some of the other guys, at least in the secondary, honestly, I give the edge to Jacksonville. Just they have some talent there. Obviously the Ravens, we talked about short-staffed in the receiver department, even if you include the tight ends into that group. I think the Jags have enough pieces, honestly, to make things difficult. I think it really comes down to kind of what we were talking about last episode with the Panthers of can the Ravens improve on their run game, right? It's really like how well they can kind of push in that direction. It might open up some of the pass game, but if the Ravens want to try and do what they've done the last couple of weeks, kind of open up with the pass game to be able to introduce the run, I think that they might struggle with that a little bit, because I do think that they have the guys to basically lock that down. I mean, if they wanted to try it, it might happen for maybe the first quarter, but then after that, I wouldn't lean on it, because I definitely think that they've got some playmakers in the secondary here.
I agree with that. It's weird. We talk about Devin Duvernay as this wide receiver one sometimes, and it just really doesn't seem that way. We kind of discussed it last week, where he just feels most natural in that number 2 slot. So it looks like Robinson's going to be that guy that steps up. So one of these guys are going to be relatively taken away. We talked about it last week too with Carolina. We had some confidence that their corner would be able to take out one of their players with J.C. Horn, and I could see the same kind of game plan happening here, and we'll see how the Ravens are able to respond. I just really I worry about that. Even though the Ravens have been really good about spraying the ball around to multiple players, for whatever reason, it just they really seem to struggle when that one of those options is taken away. So we'll definitely have to keep an eye on it. We got to see growth out of this passing offense, that's for sure. They got a hand behind their back, and that's without a doubt. And maybe when Deshaun Jackson's able to come back, that'll give them an element to their game to open things up a bit. But until then, and you can't really trust the 35-year-old hamstrings. So I think we gotta keep seeing Greg Roman evolve and adapt to the realities of this offense at this point.
He got me really depressed there with that statement there of our hope being on Deshaun Jackson to vitalize this passing attack. Really, hopefully the Ravens can find a way to get Duvernay back on track. I agree 100%. He's not a number one wide receiver. He's not even a ideal number one wide receiver in an offense where, Mark Andrews is really the number one wide receiver. He's a guy who is going to do best as the third or fourth option. And unfortunately, that's the same for Demarcus Robinson as well. That's kind of just the cards that the Ravens are drawn at the moment with this Bateman injury, which really, really sucks. But, they were able to find a way for it to work against Tampa Bay and against the Saints, neither of which did we really get the ceiling of a passing attack that we would want to see from this team, but at least better than what we got against Carolina in that wind environment. So, yeah, I think we've seen some new creative stripes from this Greg Roman offense this season. There's obviously a huge debate onto how big those strides have been. If we'd like to see more, and we always want to see more, but how much more? And it's going to require even more creativity for them to see how to make this work. I would like to say that the game we saw DeMarcus Robinson last week is something that can propel him to that type of role consistently going forward. But I think, again, like we said, we got to see him be able to do it when the defense is actually focusing on him, when they're forcing him to get those jump balls and really be physical off the line, which we haven't been able to see him do this year. He's struggled in instances where he's had to be in that spot. So, we don't really know the full health of Mark Andrews either. Is he playing at 100% or not? If he can do it, we might need him to go back into Super Andrews mode that he did last year. That might be what we're going to need. So, a lot of tough questions for this Ravens passing attack going forward. But the silver lining is the schedule seems to be allowing for the Ravens to take the opportunity to try some different things out and see what'll work before you get to, I don't want to say a real game, because we always know that games can be trap games, but the Ravens should be able to have a winning record through this stretch of games before they play Cincinnati on the last week of the season. So we'll just see what they do, and hopefully they learn some things from the Carolina game, and this game against Jacksonville will be a stepping stone to that.
What depresses me is that the Ravens aren't even mentioned in this Odell Beckham Jr. sweepstakes. I guess we don't have enough Bitcoin to pay him, but it just bums me out. Like, I think he'd be really useful in this team.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, are you kidding me? Definitely the Ravens they've definitely been a name.
Oh, they have?
Are you kidding me?
All I see is Cowboys.
Oh, yeah. I mean, maybe not like the number one, but
the Cowboys are certainly dominating the press. If you simply just type in Odell Beckham to Google, you're blasted with 4 separate articles of how Odell Beckham is a great fit for the Cowboys.
Right.
Yeah.
Not that they even need him. They've got plenty of options. Like,
I know, right? The rich just want to get richer.
I know, right? Like, I mean, I don't know. Like a guy like even like Noah Brown, like, let's see, their third, fourth option or something, like seems pretty legit. I mean, I don't know if he would do anything in the Ravens offense, but yeah, no, I mean, I think the thing with Beckham is basically just like when he can come back. But yeah, I mean, I'd be about that. If in a couple of weeks or whatever we need to bring him in, I think that could be a good piece. Because I mean, for sure, I think Bateman is a huge Beckham fan. I think they're like relatively like similar in terms of like body size, and they could probably do some very similar things, assuming he's healthy. But it also is one of those things too. It feels really weird to. It's the same thing with like Deshaun Jackson, right? It's just like that's who you had to bring in like this late in the game to be able to like get your passing offense to work. Like, it doesn't make you feel great from that perspective, but I don't know. If it works, it does. If it works, it works, We just have to hope it works.
I think the last thing we really need to talk about is actually their special teams unit. Very pedestrian. Looks like Riley Patterson is nothing but a replaceable level kicker. 1 out of 3 completed from 50-plus yards, career long at 52, 9 for 11 from the 40 to 49 range. Missed an extra point this in his career. I just think this guy is not really anyone to be scared of. He's not like an X factor or a weapon. And then Logan Cook, only 11 kicks inside the 20 all this year, 4 touchbacks. I imagine they're a team that punts a lot. So that's not that impressive either. So it looks like these guys are relatively pedestrian and they're not going to be game changers. From a kick return perspective, you got Jamal Agnew and JaMychal Hasty making returns. Both of these guys are folks that you've probably heard about if you played DFS before, as these guys who can pop off for random big weeks. So that they have the ability to, pop a big return too if the lanes are just right.
Yeah, I mean, certainly a matchup that you like, favoring the Ravens on special teams. So there is that we can look at, and if this game does get a little more competitive than expected, we know we got Tucker, and they've got a journeyman kicker. So in enough games in Ravens history over the past decade, that has been enough to swing the tide in the Ravens' favor.
We ready to do our bold predictions and score predictions?
Let's go. Let's do it.
Peter, do you want to go first? You seemed enthusiastic.
I did. I don't have either ready, but I'll do it. Yeah, like we said, this is a really interesting one to look at, especially considering just the stagnant offense that we saw from the Ravens last week. They will be going to a warmer climate. Hopefully there won't be warmer climate. They might be a warmer client. I don't know. Are they friendlier than the Panthers? I really don't know any of them personally. Trevor Lawrence seems like a friendly guy, though. Anyways, it's certainly an environment that's ripe for a trap game, like we're saying, and I think it will be competitive. As we've said, the Jaguars, although they've lost 7 games this year, they don't lose big. So I think that we're still going to see some growing pains from this offense. We mentioned Tyson Campbell. I think he's going to make things a little more difficult with this beat-up receiving core. I think the Ravens will get the win. I'll give it 20-16. I think it'll be another low-scoring affair.
Dang, Peter calling for the push.
And for my bold prediction, again, this is going to be, I think we're going to see it this week. We said that the Ravens need to get creative on offense, and we talked about how there's some iterations of the Mark Andrews package that we haven't seen yet. I'm going to call it, we're going to see a passing touchdown from Mark Andrews. This is bizarro take. This isn't a bold take, but I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility. I think that that's something that the Ravens could try and, throw the defense off base. And when they usually do these more crazy plays, it's usually not against the top tier of defenses in the NFL. Usually it's in games where they feel like they can recover if that play goes awry. So just really nothing to suggest that that's going to happen, just that I want it to happen.
Okay, I'll go next. Yeah, after last week, I feel like I need to temper expectations a little bit in terms of score prediction. We were wildly off.
Real.
I mean, Alec, I guess your score prediction was the closest, but also I really don't think we should give it
No,
to you.
I should not get the points. Like,
we did,
it's not in the spirit.
Did not score, so.
Yeah, we were so far off base. It's like if you think, I think Dallas might be able to eke out a victory against Minnesota. It's like, shame on you. You don't even get the points for that. Like,
that's true. Yeah, 40-3. Not the score most people predicted. Yeah, I think this one could be a little bit closer. I think I might go with 18-13 and some weird, like, Ravens score a ton of field goals. Be able to pull this game out. Let me do the math real quick because I want to make sure this doesn't alter my bold prediction because I was thinking about doing something on the offense. What's that? 6 field? Jeez, that's 6 field goals. Oh God, that would not be good. I'm gonna say that Lamar Jackson leads the Ravens down to score a touchdown and a 2-point conversion to Mark Andrews, and that'll be what gets to 18 somehow if I can math correctly. I think it'll work out.
Last week is really making us all overthink this.
Not Alec. All right, so here's the thing, guys. Like, what we didn't mention in our talk about the game is on average for the other 7 games of the year where they, there's a couple games down here where they've given up very few points, and then the other 7, it's 26 per game. I was thinking about 24 going in. I was thinking about 24, so this about lines up. So like 24. Now, how many points do I think the Jaguars are going to be able to put together? Dude, I thought about it, and I looked him up. I said, Riley Patterson, what do you look like? And he looks like a bro. It looks like he had some fun in college. And this 23-year-old guy, I think he's going to miss a field goal. So it's like, all right, one opportunity wasted. What's the score now? Dude, I think they might get a shutout. I think it could be 24-0. I really do. I think this defense is hot as crap. The offensive line is not looking that good. The secondary still looks solid. Even if they don't have Hamilton, I think the Stevens on the outside, Marlon on the inside will be sufficient enough for what they got going on. And I could just see a lot of missed opportunity. And, the one time they think they feel confident, they kick a field goal, they miss it. So I can actually see a shutout. It probably won't be. It'll probably be more like 6 points, probably more like 24-6. But I'm enthused. I'm going to say 24-0.
And bold is that they miss a field goal?
Yeah, he's gonna miss. Well, it's not my bold prediction. I haven't gotten there yet. I'm just saying. I think.
Okay,
I'm just playing out the whole game for you. You only have to watch it on Sunday. Maybe you want to spend time with family during the long holiday weekend. So there you go. Ravens 24-0. But the bold prediction is obviously the defense is going to be pretty dominant in this game. I say the Ravens are able to keep their whole offense to under 230 yards.
I'm assuming that their season average is somewhere north of that. 300 maybe.
I looked it up. They average 222 passing yards a game and 139 rushing yards a game. So it feels good to say 230 is pretty low.
All right. Well, I guess that about does it. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We hope you enjoyed this one. Looking forward to this game on Sunday. Hope you all have a very happy Thanksgiving. And a nice extended weekend if you have one. Enjoy the time off and rest and relaxation, turkey, all the other foods that you and your families partake in. We'll be back with NFL Bets episode later this week, as well as the Ravens History Corner. And we'll be back to recap this game next week and talk about the Denver game coming up after that. You can still find us. I believe our account is still live on Twitter if Mr. Musk hasn't banned our account for whatever reason. We're still there. We're still on Twitter, still on YouTube, at OneWinningPod. You can always email us at onewinningpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you guys. Like I said, have a good holiday and go Ravens.